How does memory work in this novel? For much of this novel, it would be easy to say that memory is shame. On page 191, Lila is kind of going into the core of her story, the part of her story that shames her the most. And she remembers that one day the missus, this is at the brothel in St. Louis, asked her, "Do you have any little treasures you want to keep safe? Anything you want to give me?" And Lila said, "I got a knife. That's the only thing. I've been wanting to give you my knife." The words were just there, and she said them, and she meant them too. "Bring it to me. Let me keep it for you, dear. We don't want a life gnawing around the house." So Lila went to the closet and found it still hidden there and took it and handed it over, amazed as she did it, thinking, "This is it. I'm here now. This is the life I'm going to have." It's a profound moment because the knife is Lila's inheritance from Doll. It isn't much. It's an image of violence. It is the knife with which it's suggested that Doll killed Lila's father, her birth father. It's a weapon. It's an object of destruction. It's an object of survival. It's also all that Lila has. And in this moment, she gives it over to the woman who runs the brothel. In this moment, she gives herself over to the brothel. And this is going to be her life. And she knows it. The reason this is such a shameful moment for Lila is because it's the moment of her complicity in all that's been going on in a profound way. It's that moment of conscious complicity when she knows she could do something else, and yet there seem to be no other options, and so she does it anyway. And it feels like her free choice to give herself over to this world of the whorehouse. The shame continues because on page 194, she falls horribly in love with Mac, one of the guys who comes to the house. And of course, he doesn't frequent Lila, but rather another one of the girls, Rosie. Rosie, is Lila's name. Missy, right? Rosie is Lila's whorehouse name. Missy is the one who he sees. But he wants to make Missy jealous. And so he says things about Lila. And Lila is terribly in love with him. And this is what he says. "Rosie here is the kind of girl a man would want to marry. There are good time girls, and there are the girls you'd want to take home." And Missy would say, "Why, she's as tough as a mule. I guess you might take her home if you needed some plowing done." And he'd say, "A man wants a girl the other fellas ain't going to come hankering after." This is a moment of incredible shame for Lila. She has fallen in love with Mac. She would like for someone to want her, someone to care about her, someone to love her, someone to see her. And he does. Except for he sees her with spite and with a sort of evil rejection. The reason he sees her, the reason he wants her, is to make fun of her and to use her to manipulate Missy. He wants her only because no one wants her. He wants her because he can control someone like her. And that's exactly what he's doing. Memory is shame. And again, we see it as she remembers that she would have stolen the baby, Missy's baby. She wanted to steal it because then she could have someone who would love her and who would need her and who would depend on her the way she had loved and needed and depended on Doll, especially before Doll abandoned her on the church steps. But that is also a shame for her, that she was so unloved, she was going to steal love, and she knows it. Memory can be an incredibly powerful tool for shame. Few of us make it to adulthood without things that embarrass us. Many of us, by our early 20s and mid-20s, have things that truly and deeply shame us in our memories. But that's not the only way that memory works in this novel. Because all of this remembering that brings Lila so much shame is her remembering as she also is remembering how she came to be the Reverend's wife. And in this, we start to see that memory is maybe able to do something else, that somehow memory, even memory of shame, might be able to be turned into something good. There's this interesting thing at the end of Genesis. We have the story of Joseph and his brothers, and Joseph's a bit of a jerk. That's how he ends up in the pit, right? He's always lording things over his brothers and like telling them stuff and being kind of spoiled for all sorts of reasons. He ends up in the pit, and he ends up in Pharaoh's house, and of course he's an interpreter of dreams, and that's what gets him out of prison eventually, and what gets him to be powerful in the kingdom. And then his brothers come and don't recognize him, and he sends them away with a cup of divination hidden in Benjamin's backpack. And the cup of divination has bothered a lot of commentators throughout history, because what is Joseph doing conducting divination, right? Like, what's up with this? He's not supposed to be doing magic. Like, that's not what this sort of character is supposed to be doing. But when you think about it, divination is about interpretation, right? It's the ability to read the signs. And at the end of that story, we see Joseph's gift for interpretation that first gets him into so much trouble with his brothers, his gift for interpretation that gets him out of trouble and out of prison and ends up putting him in a place of power. His gift of interpretation becomes the thing that allows him to redeem his family's past and make a way forward for reconciliation. After he plays a few tricks on his brothers and gets his father finally down there, he reveals himself to them. They're afraid because they know what they've done to him. They didn't kill him, but they did sell him into slavery, and they had plotted to kill him in the first place. And they weren't really good brothers. They're afraid of what he's going to do because now he's powerful. And he tells them not to be afraid because although they intended it for evil, God intended it for good so that he might save their entire family. Joseph uses memory and the ability to interpret the past, not to silence evil or to say it didn't exist or it didn't happen, but he finds a way to reinterpret that past, to make a way forward for reconciliation for his family, because he can see how this is also going to be a redemptive moment for his family. And in that, we start to see memory becoming something that doesn't just work for shame and bitterness and guilt and fighting, but memory starts to be a space of redemption. And we see this toward the end of Lila as well, where memory starts to become that thing that will stretch out and redeem the lost. As Lila's imagining, like, the resurrection and what's going to happen when everyone's resurrected and how it can't be heaven. It can't be a good thing if all of these people who she has loved are not there too. It's a sort of Calvinistic universalism where love becomes the thing that compels people out of their graves. Love becomes the thing that pulls them up and resurrects them, even if they didn't know they wanted it, even if they didn't know that they needed it. And of course, this is what we've seen with Lila and the Reverend already, right? The Reverend's love has somehow compelled Lila to life through this novel, even though she didn't know she wanted it, even though she was pretty sure she didn't want it at the beginning. Somehow his love compelled her out of the death that she was living into a new life. Ultimately, love becomes the thing that not only redeems us, but that redeems others. To remember well is to redeem the past, and maybe even the self. And maybe this is why we're commanded so often in the Bible to remember what God has done. Because somehow memory, as horrible as it can be, might also offer us the seeds for redemption and for reconciliation. So as you read about Lila remembering her past, where do you see memory functioning as a tool of redemption in this novel? And where in your own life might hard memories open up paths for redemption?